All right, afternoon, everyone. My name is Chantel Hartman. I'm the Tobacco Use Prevention Coordinator at the State Health Department's Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. Thank you to the Department of Education, and thank you to all of you for joining us today. We're going to spend some time discussing what many of you know as the epidemic of youth e-cigarette use. So we will try to leave some time for questions at the end. If I'm not able to get to your question or we just simply run out of time, I'll be sure to get with Gary to make sure that we have those questions on record, and I'll try my best to get back to you as soon as possible. And again, like I said, I just appreciate your time today. So the Surgeon General has stated that we really need to start emphasizing the importance of protecting our children from a lifetime of nicotine addiction and the associated health risks by immediately addressing this epidemic. The recent surge in e-cigarette use among youth is being fueled by new types of cigarettes that are constantly entering the market. And ultimately, it's just a cause of great concern. And that's in the education sector and also in the public health sector. So no matter how it's delivered, nicotine is harmful for youth and young adults. E-cigarettes typically contain some form of nicotine. Not all do, but some do, as well as other chemicals that have been known to damage health. For example, some of these users aren't aware that they're actually risking their respiratory systems to being exposed to these harmful cigarettes, e-cigarettes, because, again, the harm perception is just lower among youth. So that's pretty much what we're going to discuss today. Like I said, feel free to jot your questions down along the way. If I can't get to them at the end, we'll make sure that we get to you at a later time. So whenever we discuss tobacco throughout this presentation, we're referring to the commercial use of tobacco and not the sacred or religious use of tobacco among American Indian people living in Oklahoma. So e-cigarettes, as you know, are very popular among youth and young people. Their use has dramatically increased, especially over the last couple of years. And the way the data shows is that high school students use e-cigarettes more than regular cigarettes. And although we've made great strides with combating the use of combustible tobacco with kids, we're now facing a new dilemma with the use of e-cigarettes. Currently, we're relying on youth risk behavior survey data to really understand what that use looks like. And please be sure to note that the state-based youth risk behavioral survey, as well as the national youth risk behavioral survey, is actually administered every 2 years, and those are odd years. So the 2019 survey is currently being administered, so we're going to use the 2017 data. So as you can see, this slide pretty much shows you what that use looks like among high school students. And as you can see, some of those combustible and smokeless are lower when it comes to electronic vapor products. So although, like I said, we've made great strides, we're constantly trying to create smoke-free environments and really establish the social norm that tobacco use and exposure to secondhand smoke is not something that we want. We really need to start considering how we're going to use those evidence-based strategies to combat electronic cigarette usage. So the question that some of you are asking, I receive it a lot, and some of my constituents also receive the question like, what are e-cigarettes? What are vapes? So we're talking about disposable e-cigarettes, rechargeable e-cigarettes, vaporizers, and more recently, mods. So the history of these products actually can go all the way back to 2004. So if you think about the time span, that evolution, of course, it'll keep up with the times and it'll try to make the design sleek. It'll try to make them more attractive to people. But ultimately what these devices are, they're basically a device that will heat liquid and turn it into an aerosol that the user inhales. So the liquid usually, like I said, can contain some type of nicotine and flavoring to it and other additives. The nicotine in e-cigarettes and regular cigarettes is addictive. E-cigarettes are considered tobacco products because most of them contain nicotine, which comes from tobacco. Besides nicotine, e-cigarettes can contain harmful and potentially harmful ingredients, and these ingredients can also come in the form of ultrafine particles that are inhaled deep into the lungs. And these flavorants that so many youth are attracted to can really cause some serious damage and actually include some heavy metals as well. So as you can see on this slide, it kind of shows you the different options. So in the classroom, you may see some of these, you may not see them at all. But I think the most important thing about this slide is to show you that although Juul is the hot topic right now, you may want to start making yourself more familiar with what all of these products may look like. So you may have some situations where it's an e-pipe, an e-cigar, or all the way down to one of the older models, the disposable e-cigarette. But like I said, be sure that you're at least aware of them, what they look like, what they can do. You have some that are, they come with a pod that you actually can insert at the top of the product, and then some also you can just dispense the actual juice. So again, just try to be as familiar as possible with them. We won't go too deep into each one, but I did want to give you a visual aid. So again, as far as e-cigarettes and vapes go, it's pretty basic components. You have a battery that's actually powering the device. You have a portion of the device that actually heats up the e-liquid. You have where the e-liquid is stored, and then you have a mouthpiece where a user actually inhales that aerosol. So pretty simple, and again, this is just one type, more so the disposable type of product, but be sure that you, whenever you have time, just become a little more familiar with those products. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the evolution of e-cigarettes. It's important to note that there are copycat products flooding the market all the time. Many of these companies are really trying to produce lookalikes to the major brands, such as Juul, so that they can really cash in on what this craze and this epidemic relates to and profit. So because there are so many new devices, they actually are social media accounts and these media companies that receive e-cigarettes and vaping devices on a regular basis so that they can test them out, give their reviews on social media, and also platforms such as YouTube. But there was a recent media account that posted back in May that it feels like a new pod system is released every day, and they receive tons of products on a weekly basis. So to many, it's just no way that we can actually review these products and give a very definite review on what they can provide to the consumer. So if you really think about what that means, in a generation where social media reigns supreme for a lot of what they consume, a lot of lifestyle and social influences, there are companies that are being recruited and being compensated to actually review these products and post media media templates of what these products can do, what the taste, what's the feel, what does it look like in a social setting. So on this slide, you can really see the evolution from, as I mentioned earlier, that generic combustible tobacco cigarette into the first generation e-cigarette, which was designed to look very similar to that combustible cigarette. And then as you move on towards the third generation, it's a little different in how those are made. And on the right side, you can see what the current e-cigarettes on the market look like. And as I mentioned before, there is Juul. So everyone knows about Juul, everyone hears about Juul, but it's very important to note that as the market becomes more saturated with products, especially copycats, you can't focus strictly on Juul. You have to focus on the product. So that's e-cigarettes and vapes, not just Juul. Juul, of course, is definitely a part of the issue, but we have to be aware of the drop. We have to be aware of blue and the other things that youth may have access to. So, speaking of Juul, so in the recent months, the FDA has taken some action regarding Juul, including issuing warning letters to retailers for selling these products to minors. The FDA has also asked the maker, which is Juul Labs, to turn over documents related to marketing, health effects, and use among youth. So while these actions are encouraging, problems with tobacco products like Juul won't be addressed until the FDA fully regulates e-cigarettes and establishes a strong strict and firm pre-market review process to prevent these products from actually becoming accessible to youth in the first place. So if you're ever interested in some of the things that the FDA has required of Juul, I encourage you to visit the FDA's website and gain more information about that. So, as some of you have seen in your classrooms and in your communities, Juul resembles a flash drive. It's very easy to conceal. One of the things that Juul has been great about is, and not in the good way, but they use social media to their advantage because they know this generation concentrates on social media as a social influence and also as a consumer influence. It's very minimal aerosol produced, so it's easy to hide. You'll see kids using them in the restroom or in the locker room and, places where there's a lot going on, so it's easy to wave it off if there's any vapor produced at all. And then they're also able to make it their own. So it's a way of them, showing their independence or their personality by using these customizable wraps and skins that are sold for Juul products. So it can be something as far as their favorite collegiate team. It can be their favorite color. It can be a pretty polka dot pattern, all kind of things. But because it so closely resembles a flash drive, a lot of times in the education setting, it's just not oftentimes feasible to say what it is in relation to a flash drive. But more importantly, we have to know that this product is not harmless. It contains about as much nicotine as a pack of cigarettes. So that's, roughly 200 puffs. So if you're thinking about that level of nicotine, a youth having access to that level of nicotine, sharing it with friends and getting that, what they often call a buzz, which is often they don't know, it's the reaction to the actual nicotine going through their system. So a lot of times they'll say it can't be that bad. Well, it might be. It might be that bad, and it's something, again, that we just have to make sure that we're letting them know and let them know the effects of this addictive substance called nicotine. So another thing that you may hear from youth in your life, whether it's your students or just in a personal setting, is that, well, Juul isn't big tobacco. Juul isn't a part of a tobacco company like Marlboro, and that's just not true anymore. So two things that the Truth Initiative posted on their social media site, I believe it's Twitter, not too long ago, was breaking. The company that once said that they're not big tobacco is joining forces with big tobacco. So the makers of Marlboro have actually invested almost $13 billion into Juul at this point. A lot of that comes from the fact that Juul was able to saturate and take over the market in such a short amount of time and get this social media presence and this following. It was literally going to be, when was big tobacco going to take notice and become interested in what this is? So as the other post says, never thought we'd see these two getting cozy for the holidays, but I guess money really can buy you love, or at least a significant stake in Juul. So it is sad and ironic that e-cigarettes, a product intended for adult users, now might have a new generation of users addicted to nicotine, and it definitely makes you question some of the motives behind some of these marketing tactics, the flavor options, and the sudden investment by big tobacco. So youth initiation and access, we spoke about the FDA earlier. They have declared it as an epidemic. It's important to note there is no safe amount of nicotine that can be consumed by youth. And most adult smokers begin in their teens. And some of the cited reasons for e-cigarette use by youth is the curiosity about the flavors, the taste, the low perceived harm. And most just want to try it for the first time because of those social sources. And then it's the experimentation part of it, especially in social settings. But we do know that nicotine can harm the developing brain and cause addiction, and that's not something that we want so early on in life. So as I mentioned, Truth Initiative earlier, this summer they really put a lot of time into working with youth to try to figure out what some of the reasons behind this sudden, uptick in use by youth And this was a survey that I believe only included about 600 to 700 youth, and they were saying, we use it because our friends use it. We use it because it's not as bad as a cigarette, and the flavors are good. But I think one of the most interesting things is over 20% of those youth said that they enjoy the buzz. And as I mentioned earlier, that buzz is from the nicotine content. So we have to make sure that we educate youth about that buzz as not a good feeling or not something that you want to have, because it's leading you down a road of possible addiction. So Truth was actually, they were also able to survey some more youth to say, okay, where are you getting these things from? We know that youth should not be able to purchase e-cigarette products, but they clearly have access to them. So they're getting them from retail locations. They're getting them from social sources like their friends, their older siblings, and just generalized social, older individuals in their social circle. But they're also getting them from the internet, which is, a thing that can't be is easily tracked. You do have different avenues that kids can actually get into access into these sites. I mean, some sites only require that you say I'm over 21 or I'm over this particular age, and then boom, you have access to them. But I think, especially at the retail setting, we have to make sure that we are educating retailers about the importance of not providing any tobacco product, especially those that contain nicotine and any other tobacco product at all, to youth. It is against the law. There are consequences, whether they're monetary or just generalized, you being notified to the community to say, hey, this particular retailer has sold products to youth before. So those are just some things that you can keep in mind as you work with others in the community and in your education setting, that they're getting them from somewhere, and we have to really talk to them about where they're getting them from and the consequences behind getting those products from these sources, whether it's the consequence to them or the consequence to the actual source. So as I mentioned earlier, some of the things that are alarming with this craze and this epidemic is that it's created a social norm where youth don't believe that there's danger associated with use. So as I mentioned earlier, Jules especially did a very great and strategic mechanism of focusing on a social media presence, whether that's Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, whatever the case may be. And it's created this thing where people want to be an influencer. You have some of the major influencers on social media using Juul, using hashtag Juul, Juul Life, Juul World. So if you're ever just interested in finding out what some of this social media presence looks like, I challenge you to go into your social media, if you do have it, and use some of those hashtags so that you can see what that social media presence looks like. I also want you to be able to see what that social media presence looks like and how it varies from platform to platform. Excuse me. As you can also see, they're incorporating Juul into lifestyle choices. So would Juul like to go to prom with me, and posting it on social media so that others can see? And then on the right-hand side, you have a snap from another student in the classroom saying, hey, boy, we're in class. What are you doing? So that's something that we have to be aware of. There are students who see it. There are students who are going to do what this student did and call their peers out. But we have to make sure that we're actually aware of what the social media presence looks like so that you can actually help those students understand it's not a good look to do this. What impact will this have on your future? When people start to look at your social media, when it's time for scholarships, when it's time for athletics, all of these things that they don't think about when they engage in this behavior. But of course, we can all be there to steer them in the right direction and educate them the best way we know how. So it has, like I said, it has been shown that adolescents hold a more favorable attitude towards e-cigarettes, but they also support the regulation of cigarettes. So they do have some understanding of the harm and ways to combat the harm, but you have a lot more who just don't understand the long-term benefits of the long-term effects of it. So another important thing to discuss about this is the flavors. Most of these products are flavored. Youth are more likely to attract to the flavors. That's a known fact, especially as we look at the history of tobacco products. That the cotton candies, the cherries, the grapes, these flavors have been associated with addiction, but they've also been associated with appeal to kids, and ultimately it leads to the youth. It may lead to the use of conventional tobacco. So as far as advertising and marketing, I spoke about it briefly before when I was talking about Juul and social media. But you can, if you go back to the slide where I actually showed the evolution of e-cigarettes, they are really focusing more on the design and the packaging. So although the conventional tobacco may look a certain way or have a historic look to it because they have those more defined customers, e-cigarette producers know that they will constantly have to be with the latest trend. If they aren't, they don't get the customers. If it's old and it's not reflective of what's going on in social media and what the influencers are using, you'll be easily taken out of this market. They don't want that. Another thing that they're also doing is looking at the impact of online retailers versus brick and mortar stores. So your corner store versus being able to just go online and use their debit card and have it shipped to the house before parents actually get home. These are some of the things that we have to keep in mind when we're talking about how not only are kids getting these products, but why the products appeal to them so much. Not only are they easy to hide, but they may just be easily accessible. So whether you're parents or are able to speak to parents, but be sure to let them know that you have to be aware of what's going on as far as purchases and products arriving at their home, and really feel free to just ask questions about what those youth actually see as an appeal to these products. And the Surgeon General has stated multiple times that the themes and the techniques actually used by these companies is very similar to conventional cigarette advertising. Same game, just a different product. Okay, there we are. So the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, has found that no e-cigarette is safe for youth consumption. We've talked about that. A lot of times you will hear people try to insert the argument that, they help people quit, What we're discussing is not allowing youth to gain access to a product that could lead them to long-term nicotine addiction. So although there are some who have success stories with these particular products, we are strictly talking about protecting youth from access to these products that could lead them to nicotine addiction. Those are some of the points that you are more than welcome to use. But ultimately, the public health risk, we aren't aware because the time hasn't been there to find out what the long-term effects are, much less the long-term effects of early nicotine exposure from these products and the heavy metals and the flavors are in youth 10, 15 years down the line. So again, although it may sometimes be frustrating that you can't say it'll do this, it'll do that, do take some type of solace in the fact that there are products in these, there are ingredients in these products that have been found in other dangerous tobacco products, and that we know that early nicotine exposure for youth can be detrimental to brain development and also lead them to use of other conventional products. So another thing that you'll hear, it's harmless. E-cigarette aerosol is not harmless. It's been found to contain heavy metals. It's not containing any safe ingredients that we're aware of. So you'll also hear things about what is this doing to the air quality. So both the U.S. General and the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine have warned about the risk of inhaling secondhand cigarette emissions created by e-cigarettes, and they're also trying to figure out how the emissions are going to affect the air quality and the production and efficiency of some of these ventilation systems that we encounter every day. So again, although we don't have very defined things in terms of secondhand smoke or long-term health effects, we do know that it will cause problems based off of what we have now. So as they come out, we'll be more than happy to communicate those with you. So I know sometimes we don't want to say it, but again, like I said, the truth is we just don't know. These products weren't introduced, that long ago, and it's really, really unfortunate that we do have a system where FDA is not in full control of these products, but more research is being actually ordered. We are doing more research to find out what the aerosol contains, what it'll do to people. But we also have to understand that there are injuries and poisonings that can happen to not just the user, but the unintended victims. So one of the things that includes is the Child Nicotine Poisoning Prevention Act, where we have to make sure that these products are being kept in places where babies and toddlers cannot get access to them and then become victims of nicotine poisoning. So again, long-term effects, short-term effects, all of which are very important, and it's okay to say that you don't know, and you'll get back to someone as soon as you have those answers. And as I mentioned before, early exposure to nicotine on the adolescent brain can have a large impact on the areas of brain that are responsible for attention, memory, learning. It can also reduce brain activity, but have a negative effect on their concentration and their memory. These are things that they need to know. They may not take them as serious right now, but long-term impact, those are some of the very firm areas that you can speak on and, again, push that message to them. And the risk of addiction. We don't want them to start early on a lifelong journey of trying to combat addiction. Youth are more sensitive to nicotine than adults, so that makes them more likely to become dependent faster. And you're also talking about products that contain a higher amount of nicotine. So we really are concerned about that when it comes to nicotine dependence, but we also know that there's a link, a possible link to alcohol use, substance abuse, and just trying to modify these products to get a faster buzz or figure out a way to get another type of substance delivery out of the same product. In preventing youth access, ultimately compliance is one of the greatest tools that we have. Again, as I spoke about those brick and mortar stores, they do have actual opportunities through the SINAR survey, which is a annual survey that goes into these stores to find out how many of them are actually selling products to underage users and to minors. So I know that there are some states, including Oklahoma, who are trying to figure out the best way to make that something that we can actually use as a tool. Tobacco requires a license, vapor doesn't necessarily. So you have these situations where we have to keep working on the infrastructure to make sure that we can actually prevent youth access at all levels. And sometimes underage vapor sales are just compliance-based and they're difficult to track. So if you have any suggestions on how to go about that or just general interest about it, I'd be more than happy to go into more detail about what some of the compliance options are or just some general things that you see in your community that you think would be a great help. And then there's the call to action. So you've had at least 6 different public health and medical groups who have made firm calls and very much their desires known to the FDA that there needs to be regulation and strict monitoring of these products, including flavors, making sure that they're not available on the internet, prohibiting this branded merchandise that they have. Some of the things that you might see in your schools is sweatshirts and sweatpants that actually allow used to conceal these products while they're in the classroom, but it's actually in their clothing. So we can think of a million different ways that could go wrong and cause potential safety hazards to other students around them. And also order the removal of Juul lookalikes. They're riding on the bandwagon of Juul's success, but again, these products are not regulated, and we can't say what the dangers of them are, especially if copycats are constantly popping up every day. So those are just some of the call to action items that public health and medical groups have asked of the FDA. And then the next steps for Oklahoma. I think it's great, if you haven't already heard, Senator J.J. Dossett, who is a former educator himself, proposed a bill to ban vaping in schools across the state. He held an interim study that we were able to participate in the fall to really look at what the impact of vapor products are and what their presence, may be in Oklahoma schools. So it has passed the unanimous vote approval, and it's actually from the Education Committee. And ultimately what it'll do is expand the Tobacco-Free Schools Act and basically ban any vaping product, including non-combustible devices, their cartridges, whether they contain nicotine or not, in any public or private school building or vehicle. So if you're interested more in that, it's actually Senate Bill 33. And then I know another hot topic that we receive a lot in the center is, what do we do about cessation? Is there something available for youth when it comes to cessation? So as I'm sure you all know, there is the Oklahoma Tobacco Helpline. We have that option, but the Truth Initiative has actually launched a e-cigarette quit program that's specific to youth. They tailor these messages by the age group. They also make recommendations, whether it's the teen, a young adult, a parent, educator. So if you're ever curious, I say text the number and really see what these free texting-based cessation options look like. And if you want to see it online, there's the option of becomingx.org, and then there's also an app called This Is Quitting. But ultimately, Truth really wanted to expand their quit smoking resources because they know that e-cigarette use is such a problem. This innovative and free text message program was created with the input of teens and college students. So it's something that they will most likely be able to relate to, but it's already been integrated. It's shown great success, and I say, hey, if it's something that may help youth and it's been tested, I do challenge you all to at least take some time and look through what some of those options may be. And if you need to give this option to someone in your life who is a user of e-cigarettes, let them know it's anonymous. Let them know that it's something that will tailor to what their needs are, and that it's free. Those are the major points. So another thing that you all have asked is, what have schools done? And Truth Initiative did a survey last year of some middle school and high school teachers and administrators across the U.S., and this is an example of some of the things that these respondents said that they actually did. Some of them use cameras for surveillance, but we know that sometimes resources are very limited. So I think it's great that Oklahoma has the 24/7 Tobacco-Free Schools Act, and we are very grateful for that policy. But it has to be a policy of strength. That's very important. The policy needs to include these products. And if you're ever wondering how to include those products, or you have a question about what your policy is, or you want to know how to make that policy stronger, feel free to reach out at the state level. Feel free to reach out to your local TSET, Healthy Living Program grantee. They'll be more than happy to help you. So you have resources there. So be sure that you can at least start on the ground level to say, hey, we're doing the best we can in our school right now to prevent our students from using. Another thing that they responded to was teachers being assigned to restroom duty for surveillance. And then some, it's 23%, that haven't done anything at all. So we'll need to figure out what that 23% is doing. And if you have any suggestions, feel free, like I said, to pass them to me, and I will get them to who they need to get to. But we would love to hear what your ideas are, or what you're able to do, what has worked for you, what isn't working. All of those things are very helpful to us. So the most important part of this presentation is, what resources do you have? That's the other question that we get all the time. Do you have any resources for us? What can we use with the kids? I'll go over at least 4 different options that you have. These options mostly all contain data, information, but they kind of vary when it comes to lessons and activities, when it comes to increasing awareness about the dangers of youth vaping. So the first one up is the FDA's The Real Cost of Vaping. This is more useful when it comes to high schoolers between the grades of 9 and 12. It just has more of a cooler feel would be the word to use there. But as I mentioned earlier, be sure to look through these resources to find if it's something that would work for you in your setting. But again, Real Cost of Vaping is something that's very much supported by the Surgeon General, the FDA. So, of course, all of these resources are credible. I've looked at a few, if not all of them at this point, but I know that everyone doesn't have a one-size-fits-all need, and I wanted to give them to you all so that you could take your time and go through them, or feel free to give me a call, and I'll put my contact information in at the end, and we can kind of go through some of those resources as well. Another very well-received resource is the Catch My Breath Youth E-Cigarette and Juul Prevention Program. This program is completely online. It's free. It's actually supported by CVS Health. So the lessons are kind of shorter. They're about 30 to 40 minutes apiece. And the great thing about, I think, this resource is that this resource actually includes a peer youth-led component. So it's not just the educator talking, but it does allow for peer-to-peer interaction. And the ages it's a little wider, so it's 11 years old to 18 years old, so I think that's about 6th grade to 12th grade. And you don't have to keep it going. We know that your time is very limited, but you can stop and start where you see necessary. But I do want you all to at least think about the impact of that possible peer-to-peer interaction. And like I said, it's completely online and it's free. Another great resource is the Stanford Tobacco Prevention Toolkit. We've received a lot of great feedback on this tool from some of you in the community. Again, this is an option that can be adapted to fit the individual needs of you as an educator, but also your students. So that can be elementary, middle, high school. It can also be used in your community-based organizations, and we can use it as the health department as well. So what this actual resource encourages you to do is pick and choose which lessons work best for your students. But you also have PowerPoint presentations, worksheets, activities, and they can all be altered. And then to prepare you more, I think it's great that this particular resource offers you crash courses on what this particular platform actually provides for youth and for educators. And all of these resources will be in the notes in the description section of the recorded version of this website. But like I said, my contact information will be at the end of it as well. So if you need direct contact, I can definitely put you there in the meantime. And then there's also Taking Down Tobacco. So it's basically a comprehensive youth advocacy training program. It's also sponsored by CVS Health. And ultimately, it engages youth. It's also free. It's online, but it also has an in-person option. And it basically provides an introductory training for some of the youth in your schools or in your community to become their own advocates. So opportunities for them to be the educator when it comes to their peers. So, of course, you have different options to take these courses as well, but ultimately this particular resource focuses on the youth being the educator. So if you have any questions about that, I think it was 2017, we were actually fortunate enough to have Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids come to Oklahoma to actually pilot some of these trainings with some youth here. So I actually have used it several times in the community with training, and kids love it. It's also great with all ages, but I would say that this is more so for that middle school and high school student. And then the most important part, get youth involved. One of the upcoming opportunities that you have is Kick Butts Day, which is a national day of advocacy for teachers, youth, public health advocates, anyone who really wants to stand up, speak out against big tobacco. So I would tell you to go to the actual website and look at what some of the activities that you can do. Most of them are very low cost, low time commitments, but there are also some higher level things that youth are allowed to do, or you can just do community-based programs. So once and the great thing about this actual resource is that once you've planned your event, they ask you to register your event, and that way you're recognized on the national level, and it'll be a map. So it'll show you on the map and say, hey, this particular school is doing this activity on this day, please contact this person. This will also give you the opportunity to apply for scholarships and grants to actually help facilitate some of those activities. So I did want to highlight some of the things that have been submitted to me from local youth teams, schools as well, about what their students are really doing to combat the use of e-cigarettes in their social scenes and also in their schools. So Noble SWAT was actually able to attend the Community Anti-Drug Coalition National Leadership Forum in Washington, D.C. So basically it's a 4-day event where they learn strategies to address substance abuse prevention, talk with prevention experts, and really voice their concerns to policymakers about the impact of some of these products on their peers. So they also celebrated Kick Butts Day last year with a color run, and they wanted to incorporate wellness into how they will fight tobacco. So again, great work to Noble SWAT. We also had, and I apologize if I pronounce it wrong, Cassie Hall Preparatory School in Tulsa. So Miss Brandeis actually gave her students an assignment in class. I think it went over the course of a week. I'm not exactly sure, but she wanted them to reflect on social issues that are impacting them, their family, and their peers. And her student in the picture, Kaylee actually used a personal story and about how secondhand smoke can impact those around you. So if you can't really see it, the story says you may as well give her one too. So I thought that was great. And I think she has other students that she's going to submit their artwork as well. She just wanted to bring this to our attention, so I wanted to share it with you all. And then Wagner Middle School SWAT, they actually had a table in the entryway for one of their school's parent-teacher conferences. So I think they're out on Mondays, and it's a 4-day week. So as you can see in the back, it says it's not cool to jewel in school. And they also incorporated the wellness aspect of fighting tobacco. And we do have a video coming up for you because the question that I bring to you all is, again, you're here today to learn as much as you can and learn a little more and become familiar with e-cigarette and vapor products. But I just also wanted to share a video with you all about what youth are doing, and hopefully this will give you some ideas on how to help.
We're the generation
that is taking down tobacco for good.
I'm Carlos, and I'm fighting to make my hometown smoke-free.
We're Noble SWAT, and we're fighting to make our state and community healthier.
I'm Tira, and I'm fighting to educate my peers about e-cigarettes.
I'm Nicholas, and I'm fighting because smoking hurt my mom's health.
I'm Hannah, and I'm fighting to stop big tobacco from targeting kids.
I'm Adeline, and I'm fighting for my dad because I saw how hard it was for him to quit.
Help us win the fight.
Join us to make the next generation
tobacco-free!
So that's the end of my presentation. Again, like I said, I appreciate your time. I think we are right on time for questions if you have any. And as I mentioned before, if there are questions that need to be answered at a later date and time after some consultation with my colleagues or the Department of Ed, I'd be more than happy to get those answers back to you. I hope you learned something new today. I hope that you learned something that you can take back to your colleagues, but also to your students. Do understand that we are here to help at any time, and I would like to say thank you again to the Department of Ed for hosting this webinar and calling us and saying, hey, can you help us get our educators a resource in real time, and also something that we can put on a platform that they can look at later. So if you have any questions, feel free. I think it's a chat box that's available. And if you have any questions at a later date and time, I'll go ahead and put my contact information up so that you have my email, and you also have the phone number to the center at the State Health Department. So ponder on it for a while, take it back to your colleagues, or just, think about different ways that you can educate those around you, and feel free to get back to me, and I'll try my best to respond in a timely manner. So thank you again.